Happy evening to all of you. Welcome to today's S.Vaidhyanath Aiyar Memorial Lecture on the topic of bridging the generation gap in CA profession. We have with us a CA V. Pattabhiram sir to handle today's memorial lecture. May now request CA Pannara JS Chairman SASF Vice Chairperson SASF CA Adhyam B. Geeta, SASC Secretary CA Ayampalayam Migration Arun, SASC Treasurer CA Mandava Sunil Kumar sir to jointly escort our speaker CA V. Pattabhiram sir to the dais, please. We recognize the presence of our regional council members CA P. Satheesan sir and CA Revati S. Raghunathan ma'am. We will start today's proceedings with the invocation of ICA motto song. Let us all rise for ICA motto as a mark of respect to our mother institute.
Yaesha sutteshu jagrati, Yaesha sutteshu jagrati, Kamam 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 sho nirvimana nirvimana Tadena shukram brahma Tadevamritamucchate Tasmin lokah Sarve tadunatyavikashya Etadvaita 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 Etadvaita
Thank you. Please be seated. May I now request SASC Chairman CA Pannara Sirigiri to formally welcome the gathering through his welcome address.
Good evening, everyone. I deem it an honor to stand before you on this very special occasion of S.Vaidhyanath Aiyar Memorial Lecture, which is conducted every year. This is the first time we miss a teacher and a great committed member and a great supporter of SASC, R. Shivakumar sir, who was always organizing this event, and also some other memorial lectures from the front. We have with us one of the most prolific speaker, brilliant writer, proud member of our institute, Mr. V. Pattabhiram, another teacher who only can replace R. Shivakumar sir, in my opinion. So very warm welcome to you, sir, and thank you for accepting our invitation to be part of the lecture today, to give your lecture today. And I also recognize the presence of our Vice Chairperson Geeta, Secretary Mr. Arun, Treasurer Mr. Sunil, and my councils in the Regional Council, Revati and Satheesan, and the esteemed members. A very, very warm welcome to you all. Without taking much time from you, because we are already behind schedule, we are all very eager to hear Mr. Pattabhi, who has made his mark in various fields beyond the professional fields, which I don't want to take time of yours, because most of you know what he is. I know whenever there is a new topic or innovative subject, the first name that comes to our mind is Mr. Pattabhiram. So thank you very much for being innovative for this topic also, sir. This is, I think, in my opinion, at least in SARC, this is the first time this topic is being dealt. It is bridging the generation gap in CA profession, which is most relevant in these times. And he is the most relevant and most fit person to talk on this, being author on ChatGPT, the most volatile thing. most advanced thing. So with these words, I very warmly welcome you all and all wish that you all enjoy his talk, this innovative thought process. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairman sir. A small brief about S.Vaidhyanath Aiyar and this Vaidhyanath Aiyar Memorial Lecture. S.Vaidhyanath Aiyar was the president of ICI during the year 1957 and 58 and up to 5th February 1958 when he died in Harness. In his honor and memory, ICI instituted S.Vaidhyanath Aiyar Memorial Fund by creating a corpus in the year 1960. The corpus receives life membership, annual membership, and through voluntary contributions from the members of ICI. Under its aegis, memorial lectures are held every year at all 5 regional councils. The fund also helps CA students by providing scholarship. To his credit, late Sri S.Vaidhyanath Aiyar, during his tenure, the Chartered Accountant Students Association was formed in all the 5 regions by a government notification. S.Vaidhyanath Aiyar, during his tenure as president, inaugurated the Chartered Accountant Students Association at Madras, the present Chennai, in 1957. SASC has been conducting this memorial lecture every year, and a galaxy of personalities from different walks of life delivered the memorial lecture. The first S.Vaidhyanath Aiyar Memorial Lecture was delivered in the year 1963 by C.A. H.B. Dondi on the subject Industrial Development in India. Every year the lectures are being delivered on subjects of varied nature and dignitaries from across the country and including abroad, which speaks volumes and significance of this S.Vaidhyanath Aiyar Memorial Lecture. Now coming to this year's Memorial Lecture, C.A.V. Pattabhiram sir will take us through bridging the generation gap in CA profession. C.A.V. Pattabhiram sir is a practicing chartered accountant and a qualified costed accountant and a company secretary, founder partner of Yoganandan Ram LLP, a public accounting firm. He has taught over 76,000 CHO students, written books cutting across genres and spoken in various conferences. He is into valuation and growth strategies. Last year, 4 of his books were published. His book, Tech Phoenix, written along with the T.N. Manoharan sir, has been nominated for 4 awards and is now in the running for the Kalinga Lit Fest Book Prize. His latest book in the Professional Guide to ChatGPT, co-authored with Dungarchan Jain sir in 2023, Rotary bestowed on him the Lifetime of Professional Excellence Award. With this brief, I have great pleasure in welcoming C.A. Pattabhiram sir to handle today's Vaidhyanath Aiyar Memorial Lecture. May now request dignitaries on the dais to jointly present him with a shawl and a memento as a token of our love and affection.
Good evening to all of you. It's a privilege and a pleasure to deliver the memorial address of someone as illustrious as Mr. Vaidhyanath Aiyar. Raman has already introduced him to you, and what actually made me awestruck when I went through details of the memorial lecture is the fact that this is perhaps the only lecture that is delivered by the Institute across different cities. Raman talked about it being delivered in the 4 regional metros. Chairman just told me that this year it is being delivered in 171 different places. The man must be really, really powerful to have pushed or to have attracted the Institute to do that. Having said that, I think I'll now delve straight into the topic. As Chairman Panaraj had said, this is the first time when I'm going to talk about this. There are naturally going to be hiccups and hitches, but I know this is all said and done, our own audience, our own family, and therefore I think that should be fine. I'll speak for about 35-40 minutes. This is a topic that's quite heavy, quite dark, but at the same time, it's a topic that is absolutely relevant today. I tell it's absolutely relevant because many years ago, when I qualified from the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India and went for my first job and had a boss who was 57, 58 years old, I would feel that, look, he does not seem to understand what I'm talking. But I really respected the man for the simple reason that he was the CFO of the organization, and I was imbibed to know that if someone is holding the corner office of a particular department, he must be someone who is really good and strong. Today I think the roles are to a large extent reversed. There are many points in time across the last several years, some that happened maybe as far back as 1996, some that happened in 2007, some that happened in 2014. They're not global events, they are personal events that told me how there is a generation gap between me and someone else working in my own organization. And I'll walk you through some of those incidents, and we'll try to understand how this generation gap actually works. First, I'll introduce you to a few generations. I'll tell you about what I think are the principal characteristics of these generations and what is their attitude to work and to life. I will then try and talk about 8 distinct areas, beginning from how people take notes when they attend meetings, to how people speak in public, to how people work in the workplace, cutting across these 4 or 5 generations. And I will also hazard a guess about a generation that is going to still come. A generation with reference to which even the millennials will feel that there is a big generation gap. Now this is going to be the broad structure of what I intend to talk to you about. And like I said, it's not going to be light, it's going to be pretty heavy. I'm not able to see from here what is out there. Since I broadly know what I mean, what I want to speak, I'll explain what I have in mind. There was a generation pre-1960. So that's the generation which I call the lost generation. I call it the lost generation because that was possibly the generation that got sandwiched, or that was a generation whose career fell right in between India's independence. And from moving out from an imperialistic British Raj to a very patriotic Indian society, I think that generation was the generation that lost out on many things. Subsequent generations, including my generation, have seen the kind of advantages, and the later generations, the millennials or the alphas that are now on, they've all seen things, reaped the benefits of things that were not available to my father's generation. I'm not going to talk about my dad. That was the first generation, the one that I call the lost generation, L-O-S-T. Then comes the next generation, the generation that was born in the 60s and the 70s. The generation that grew up in the first flush of Coca-Cola coming into India. The generation that grew up in the first flush of television coming into India. The generation that grew up in the first flush of some of the nice things that started to happening in India. A generation that we call Generation X, the generation that begins in 1960 and roughly ends in 1979. Then come the third generation, the millennials, the one that began in 1980, the one that started in 1980, and I would like to put it right up to 1998, etc., as the millennial generation. The millennial generation is possibly the first generation that really saw the fruits of economic liberalization unto them. While people of my generation have seen both sides of the divide, pre-1991, post-1991. We have seen how it was so difficult to get a telephone to today how easy it is to get a telephone. To that extent, I consider Generation X as being very lucky because it saw both difficulties and it saw good things happening in India, as a result of which it has been able to appreciate the good things far more. Then comes post the millennial, post 1990, the next generation, the one that is loosely called Generation Alpha or Generation, we'll call it Generation Z, that's born sometime in 1999, 2000 to maybe up to 2015 for a 15-year stretch. That's the generation with which even the millennials are finding difficult to adjust. So just imagine how much things have changed. And I'll give you some rock solid examples to try and show you how things have changed. And then there is the next generation, the one born in 2016, that's just about 7-8 years old today. The generation that is going to see the best of AI happening is the generation that's going to see the best of automation taking place. A generation with which very clearly my generation will not be able to relate at all. And that's the generation which I don't see any of the millennials here, but that's the generation with which even the millennials will have as much difficulty as many generations have with the millennials. This therefore is the broad framework that I'm going to speak about. The lost generation born pre-1960, Generation X born pre-1979, the millennials born pre-1999, Generation Z born pre-2016, and then the generation that is going to come into our workplace somewhere around 2030, 2032. I'll now move on and try to tell you the underlying characteristics of some of these generations. Before that, I'll very quickly run you through, because all of us know this. I'll take us a minute just to put this in context. The world of accounting, has undergone remarkable change. From the time the first computers came in the mid-70s, and the personal computers started coming in the mid-1980s, to today, when everybody and his uncle is talking about AI, and many people in today's generation, forgive my saying, will not possibly know accounting with the kind of depth that an earlier generation knew, but who would still be able to prepare accounting the way accounting is required. That's how the changes have taken place. From a manual era where books, ledgers, tick marks, audit pens ruled, to today where there is no visible documentation in the sense that my generation understood. And that, I think, is a very, very great and a sea change. I'll now very quickly run you through the characteristics of each of these four generations. I'll pick up the key one. Somebody can on and off help me with the red part. See, this is the first generation that I was talking about, the lost generation. Its most significant impact was about loyalty. This is a generation which worked hard. This is a generation that believes in that 70 hours a week of work at a time when it is today fashionable for people to work 4 days a week and 4 hours a day. But this is the generation that believed and continues to believe in the 70 hours of dedicated work, the loyalty to the organization, sticking with the organization for a very, very, very long time. I'm not deriding them, please don't misunderstand me, because this is the generation that saw Dhirubhai Ambani in India. This is the generation that produced Ratan Tata in India. This is the generation that brought Steve Jobs to the world. And this is the generation to which Bill Gates belonged. It's been a remarkable generation that's worked very, very hard. One of the important things of this generation is that it believes in face-to-face conversations. Today, everybody talks about the mobile. If you give me a choice, I would not like to turn up at a face-to-face meeting. If you give me a choice, I'll be very happy delivering an address on Zoom. But that generation is not that. That generation is a generation that actually believed in the warmth of humanness. Okay? I also want to very quickly tell you now itself so that we don't get mistaken. The classification in generations, while it is for convenience based on years of birth, but what is far more important is the characteristic feature that drives that particular generation. There can be someone who is born post 1999 who might still be someone who trusts in those things in terms of loyalty, in terms of dedicated work ethic, in terms of being face to face. Okay? Let's pick up the second generation, the generation born in the 60s and the 70s, the generation to which I belong. This is a generation that began to believe in work-life balance. I still remember the day when my father told me, I'm sorry, not my father, my father's friend told me, I had job opportunities to work in 8 companies, right? From Hindustan Lever down till the Industrial Development Bank of India. Job opportunities opened up the moment I qualified for the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. My father's friend told me it's absolutely important that you must pick the right company as your first job. It's a completely different matter that I chose not to work in any of these 8 companies and then went and joined in what today we call a startup. What I'm trying to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, is that the next generation started believing in the importance of work-life balance. That I would like to work, yes. And when I step into chartered accounting practice, yes, I would like to do my CA practice, whether it is in the area of audit or accounting or whether tax or valuation. But at the same time, I would also want to do things that I actually love doing. In other words, there are some things you need to do because you have to put bread on the table. There are other things you want to do because they provide satisfaction to the heart. And this generation was possibly the first generation that started believing in it. I still remember sometime in the early 90s, somebody asked me, what is your working hour? When do you have to go to office to clock time and when do you have to come out to punch your time out? He was terribly surprised when I said, no, I work in an office where hours are flexible. I can walk in at any time, walk out at any time. And I had a boss, I wouldn't say he was a boss, he was a guy for whom I used to do work. A remarkable gentleman. The kind of work that I was doing for them was writing for their magazine. And he would say that this cover story needs to be written. He would say that I want this on the 24th of January, let's say 2024, for keeping it correct. And between today and 2024, he would not sit on my neck. He would not ask me, has there been a progress? Has anything happened? He would not ask me on the 15th of January, how much of work you have done? And that gelled very much with me. But on the 24th morning, he would call and ask, is it ready? And because I had a good wavelength with him, I would tell him, you said 24th of Jan, so why are you in a hurry? He would say, today is 24th of Jan, and I would tell him 24th of Jan ends at 12 p.m. midnight. You can have it at that particular point in time. That's not how the earlier generations worked. Even today, people who belong to the pre-60s or many even of my generation are the type who will sit on people's neck, want to know what has been the progress, endlessly supervise them, etc. etc. While people of my generation might have accepted that, the next generation, the millennials, don't. And if you run an office where you try to do that, I think you run the serious risk of becoming a misfit in such an organization. I think I'll go on to the third generation, the generation Y, the generation of the millennials. This is a generation that actually believes and values in diversity. This is the generation, unlike my generation. In my generation, I would like to work in a company, I would like to earn well, I would like to possibly enjoy life. But the next generation is something very different. It's a generation that would not just like to work well. It's a generation that actually wants to experience different kinds of work. It's a generation that likes to work different things. That's the reason why you will find that many of these guys born post 1981 to 1996, thereabout, they get very bored after they have done a certain type of work for a couple of years. Very often in my office, somebody or even any of the students who wants to do his chartered accountancy would come and say, no, I don't want to join the Big Four because all through my 3 years I have to do audit, and all through my 3 years I have to do audit in only 3 places. I would tell him that for the last 25 years, I have done the exact same thing every morning between 6:15 and 8:45. If I can do 25 years, 365 days a year, 2 hours a day, do the same thing in the morning, teach strategic financial management, then what problem do you have? He says, the guy turns around to me and says, I will never do that. And if I pick quarrel with him, I am wrong, because there is a completely different worldview of things today. So that's the generation that wants to work in a collaborative environment. That's the generation which wants to know the big picture before you give them work. It is not enough. If to me you might, for example, say, hey, do this work, write this article, this is what I want, and they will happily write. The next generation is not one which will do that. To the next generation you need to say, why is this article being written, where is it going to get published, what is the time frame by which it will get published, if it does not get published, what will happen to your work. They want to be involved in every process. And if you think that in your firm you can write roughshod merely because you're older, merely because you're more experienced, you will actually lose out the kind of talent that this generation has. And personally, I think this generation has some outstanding talent. They are really, really sharp. They are very quick on the uptake. They may not have scored great marks in their chartered accountancy. They may not have ended up finishing their CA in their very first exam. But this is a generation that actually understands many things in a very, very sharp way. And it's good that right now in our country, this is the generation that it's in the mid of its career. Let's go to the fourth one before I talk about individual items. This generation born post 1997. The other day I was thinking, now all of us here, I think most of us here know about the Y2K problem. And the other day I was just imagining, why the guy who was born in 1999, 2000. My nephew was born in 1999. I still think he's a kid. Day before yesterday, I realized that this guy is now 24 years old. In short, what I'm trying to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, is that this is a generation that actually values individuality. You cannot run roughshod over them. You just cannot run roughshod over them. It's not the generation like yours and mine where we respected elders. It is not that this generation does not respect elders. It is just that their way of approach to things is very, very different. You and I will possibly not sit cross-legged in front of a senior, in front of an elder. The generation born post 1997 will do exactly that because they don't mean any offense. All that I'm trying to tell you is that this generation loves to do multiple work. It loves to work with people from different backgrounds. It would like to work with people who come from the east of India, the west of India, the north of India, the south of India. And this is a generation which actually does not want to be handheld. I'll give you one very quick example and then move on. When we wrote this book, ChatGPT, DC and I wrote this book, we assembled 25 people to work with us. All of them worked on creating prompts. We received close to 600 prompts from 30 different people working on it. The best prompt that came was from a young lady, a young, freshly qualified chartered accountant. I was amazed. I'll tell you what she did. She went, obviously she might have had rough experience. She went to the Ola app, picked up 40 customer observations, 40 customer complaints, copied that, placed it on ChatGPT. She then went to Uber app, downloaded 40 complaints that were there in Uber, 40 customer responses in Uber, downloaded and put it on ChatGPT and asked ChatGPT to analyze 40 plus 40, 80 observations. She said, please analyze and give me the top 10. And it threw out the top 10. In hindsight, it does not appear great, but I'm 100% sure if either DC or I had told them what to do, we would never have got this. That's not the end of the, and you know, the analysis was so beautiful by ChatGPT. That's not the end of the story. The next prompt that she put out was that, now that you have told us what are the principal problems that we have with customer, please assume that you are our customer relationship manager and suggest what strategy we can adopt. And the kind of strategy that came out of it was straight out of typical top-class management textbook or a top-class HBR article. What I'm trying to tell you is that this generation, the one born post-1997, is extremely sharp. It's extremely sharp. They have a completely thorough understanding of what is happening in the world around them. And if they are working in your organization, you really have to take care of them. I'll very quickly move on to, maybe I'll not talk about all 8, I'll talk about 3, 4 of these. We'll begin with note taking. Move forward. Just move forward. Not this, all this you move, just go to point number 1. Yeah. Alright, I do not know how very clear that is from the rear, and Very quickly, what we are talking about is how do these four generations take notes. Okay, I will not go line on line. I'll just very quickly try outline how it happens. I guess all of you are clear when I say, understand what I mean by that. You turn up at a meeting. Okay, you turn up at a meeting. Could be someone delivers a talk, or in your office meeting you turn up, and there are some people who sit and take notes. How do you take notes if you were to take notes? I've seen some very, very senior people turn up at meetings, turn up at seminars, and blissfully sit and take notes. How would you take notes?
Don't take notes at all.
In your office meeting, for example,
Yeah.
how would you do?
Scribbling back.
You would pick a scribbling pad, you will have a pen, and you would write your notes.
From mobile. No.
Yeah. The next set of people are the ones, the next generation, the millennial or the subsequent, or let's talk about the millennial. The millennial will pick up. This is now the paper. There is no paper. This is the paper in that keep notes. They would enter. First time when you see, you would possibly feel offended. Is the guy looking at the mobile when we are discussing in the office? No, he's actually taking notes. The other generation, the one that is born 1997 and beyond, I experienced it firsthand. No, we had an office meeting where on the board people were writing multiple things. Then after the meeting was over, around one hour later, so I told one of those people born post 1997, saying that, can you quickly note down what is there so that you can prepare the minutes at the by the end of today. She went there, picked up her mobile and took a photo shoot. Today it is commonplace. Today all of us have got to accept that. But when it first happened, it was unsettling, because I grew up in an era where if you borrow somebody's notes because you missed a class, I grew up in an era where you don't go and photocopy, you go sit and write so that you think that even as you are reading, you will understand it. Then came the era which talked about photocopying. So what I'm trying to say is that there has been a very subtle difference in the way note-taking has happened. If you move on to the next one, where I talk about how people talk at meetings, okay? If you look at the first generation, the generation born pre-60s or maybe even early 60s, they come to meetings very well prepared, very structured. They want to know what is the agenda that would be discussed. Okay? They would come very well prepared, and they are people who would respect either age or they would respect authority. If there's a boss who says something, they would listen to them. They would maybe discuss, they would possibly argue with them, but once the boss says this is final, that's final. But that's not how things have moved on. The subsequent generation, the generation to which I belong, the generation born in the 60s and early 70s, would actually want not the boss to dictate to them. Don't want to sit in a meeting where the boss delivers a monologue. Then it's not a meeting, it's just a public address. We would like that there is a democratic discussion that takes place, that everybody's voice is heard. Ultimately, the boss could decide what he wants, but we would expect that the voice is actually heard. There is a subsequent generation, there is a subsequent generation that even while the meeting is going on, they would be on their laptop doing something. I have seen people sit in a laptop in a corporate meeting, that age group guy actually trade on ICICI Direct. But while that's not the best thing to do, all that I'm saying is that they multitask. Their focus is still very sharp. The moment you slip up or the moment they want to make a point, they would make. If there are 5 items in the agenda and if only one item interests them, people of my generation will still sit calmly, listen to all 5 items of the agenda. The third generation is just not going to do that. They will focus on the one item in which they are interested. The other 4, their mind would shut off and they would be doing something completely different. This is going to happen in the future generation as well. Future generation, the generation that is, like I said, going to come into the workplace, maybe in the late 2020s, early 2030s, might actually possibly bring a virtual assistant along with him or her to be as part of the meeting. Let's go on to the third one. I'll skip that. Let's go to the fourth. Yeah. There is a general belief that the later generations don't value time. I don't think that is very right. While it is absolutely true that earlier generations, especially the first one, and to a large extent the second one, believed in time. That if a meeting is to start at 5:30, they would want that to start at 5:30. The second generation is a little flexible. That okay, if it is not 5:30, if it starts at 5:45, it is okay. That means there is a level of tolerance. I think the third one is the first set of people who are beginning to say that I am on the way, I will log on to my mobile and sit on the meeting. Their idea, their understanding of what is being on time is undergoing a change. And it is important for us when we run our firms, especially if you belong to Generation X or Generation L, it's important that we realize, understand and appreciate that this is how the generation is. You can break your head about it. It is important not to break your head because it is only your blood pressure that goes up. So it's important to realize that these guys don't mean anything bad. It is just that they think that there are multiple things to be done. It's like what people talk about, they use the word super mom. The lady who works in the office, who also goes to the football game where her son is playing and who also turns up at the annual day function while the father is an absentee landlord. So that's the kind of generation that to a large extent second one, towards the fag end of the second one has been the people born in the late 70s are, and those born in the early 80s are as well. That in other words, they do multiple things and while they value time, their understanding of what is the right time is a little flexible, and that I think is not very, very bad unless it goes completely against the ingrains of what you accept as punctuality. We'll go to item number 5. Let me see what is there. How do they dress? That's important. I went to a meeting where there was a man, a young lad, who, he came in shorts with a half, what is that called? Not even a half-sleeved t-shirt, with a t-shirt that even did not have the spot, was seated there. And because I won't say I'm used to it, but I would say that because I know, yes, different people come differently, I went. Of course, that's an absolutely extreme example. But the point is that it was, as the meeting progressed, I realized it was not that this guy means disrespect. This person was actually the sharpest of the persons there. This was the guy who actually gave the best of the inputs out there. Okay? So, if the traditional first generation understood that people must turn up in meetings booted and suited, there is the generation that's going to come up, which will come the way that I said for meetings, and it's going to look very, very normal. The best example of that was a tweet that Mr. Anand Mahindra made sometime, I think in 2020 or 2021. There was an observation that somebody made saying that in Zoom meetings, only the top part of the body is visible, so I wear blazer and I can wear whatever beneath. And Mr. Anand Mahindra actually tweeted underneath that, yes, you are right, I myself do that, I wear a lungi underneath and I wear a coat above. And somebody asked him, where does the lungi culture come from? Should you not be wearing a pajama? He said, no, I studied in Ooty, I did my entire schooling in Lawrence School, Lovedale, and that is where I picked up this idea of lungis. The point that I'm trying to say is that Zoom meetings are the first ones that are telling people that yes, even for meetings I can come differently. Okay? So that's about the dress sense. All that I'm trying to drive home here to people who belong to the first generation there or who belong to the early years of the second generation is that kindly do not take offense. Kindly try to find out what these guys are good at and pick up what they are good at, appreciate that. When I use the word appreciate, there's another thing that strikes me. the one that belongs to the generation that's born in the late 70s. And I realized it in the course of a conversation that I had with an office colleague of mine. I grew up in an environment where you are expected to do what is given to you. I was never someone who looked up to somebody appreciating, saying, hey, this is a job well done, hey, this is a speech well done, hey, this is a speech not very well done. So that is not how we grew up at all. You know, for example, the best compliment that we could perhaps get from our parents when they attended the school meeting would be a smile that showed that they liked it. But that generation is not like that, because this guy actually openly told me, see, I don't get appreciated in office. I told him, what do you want? Has anybody yelled at you? He said, no, nobody has yelled at me, but nobody has told me that I have done a great piece of work. I was surprised, I was taken aback. I thought at that particular point in time, the guy was 25, 26. I thought a 25-year-old guy behaving like a 16-year-old, wanting to get appreciated. And then as I went further and as I read multiple things, I realized that different people have different makes. And when I say different people of different makes, I thought I'll very, very quickly pass on one very interesting piece of information. There is something called the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, popularly known as MBTI, which classifies people into 16 different personality types. And it shows you how different people respond to things differently. I'll give you an example, just to drive home the point that in organizations, different people are different. And it is in our interest to accept all kinds of people. Not that most of you don't know, but nevertheless, I thought I will tell you that. Suppose, let us say, let us for a moment assume that today's meeting is being organized, or a seminar is being organized. Tomorrow's program, for example, the tax program is being organized. I asked this guy, how many people have enrolled? I am interested in knowing how many people have enrolled. 150 enrolled, I got 350 enrolled, I got 400 have enrolled, is what I am interested in. But this guy, he will say, I met the chairman of SIRC. I called up 5 people in corporate India. I went, met them. By now my blood pressure is up. I want to know how many people have enrolled. You know, I met the CEO. CEO said, I will give you 20 people. And I met the other CFO. That other CFO told me, you come tomorrow. Only later I realized that people are of different types. While I would want to know how many people have actually enrolled, he wants to actually tell me what kind of effort he has put in. He wants to tell me what kind of effort he has put in, because I'm not going to ask him what kind of effort he has put in. And Vasu, for example, knows that gentleman. So he would go to Vasu's office and Vasu would say, I'm sending 10 people. This guy will not tell me 10. He'll say, I went, met Vasu. Vasu offered me a cup of tea, and then we sat there, we discussed, I explained to him, these are the speakers. I said, I know who the speakers are, how many people are in. So all that I'm trying to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, is that there are different people, even within our respective generation, but cutting across generation, the thing is really, really very different. Can we quickly go on to the next? Do they know their subjects well? The first generation knows its subjects thoroughly well. I'm not talking about the last one, because that's the generation that is to still come up. The third generation knows its subjects reasonably well. But the third generation can crack a problem using technology. That generation does not know how it got cracked. I'll give you a crude example. It's not the best example. I'll give you a crude example. For example, I can sit and find out why a trial balance did not tally. I might take 1 hour to do it, but I know how to find out how a trial balance did not tally. Or if I were to go and audit receivables, I would know how to segregate them. Whereas that generation would not know how to segregate them. That generation knows how to quickly cut, copy, paste into Excel and quickly use, not even know which commands are, but go around, play like how a kid plays on the mobile and do its job. In other words, that's the generation that knows how to get things done. In fact, when I talk about kids, I'm now going to talk about the very last generation. I have a nephew who is 4 years old. Okay, I have a nephew who is 4 years old. 3 days ago, I booked an Ola, and I was just telling my sister, I will call the driver and find out where he is. This guy tapped me like this and he says, Mama, phone kuda. Give me the phone. I said, what are you going to do with the phone? Phone la map irukku. Map la code pogum. And the code la nariya car pogum. Adu vachi kandu. I was astonished. I'm sure this must be there in many households. But for a 4-year-old kid, and that is that generation, the last one, for a 4-year-old kid who does not know how to make a call, who can actually think how this can be found out is remarkable. And that is where these millennials are going to face a challenge. The second generation, which now thinks they are at the cutting edge of technology, they are going to face serious challenge because that fourth generation is going to be 2 times as smart as the second. Okay? So, what I am saying is the third generation knows how things needs to be done, whereas your generation and my generation possibly know what the right things to do are. Let's go to item number 7. I said there are 8, so I will go to 7. Public speaking. The whole of the first generation believes in public speaking in the very traditional format. That I must tell a story, I must inject humor. This is the generation that grew up reading Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People by Public Speaking. Or this is the generation that went to public speaking schools and had a very structured way of learning how to speak. As you progress, there is a second one. Malay, what is written in red? Second one?
Incorporating multimedia.
That is the generation that incorporates multimedia. If you actually heard someone like Nani Palkiwala speak, or by someone like Arvind Dattar speak, they speak without notes. Dattar, for example, speaks without any pops with it. Reels everything straight out of the head. First time when I heard it, I was amazed. I said, how can a man have so much information up his head? But the second one is the one that uses a lot of gadgets, multimedia, etc. The third one, what is the red one there, Malay?
Focusing on authenticity.
Sorry?
Focusing on authenticity.
Yeah. The third one, the generation born in post 1999, is not very keen on how well they speak. They are far more keen on how authentic they are. That is why if you watch on YouTube, or if you go to any of those icon conferences, or if you go to any of those large meetings, you will find a young entrepreneur come there, a 25, 30-year-old entrepreneur. He wouldn't possibly be dressed the way that you think people should dress, who would come there and then talk straight from out of his heart, breaking every single rule that Dale Carnegie must have taught, breaking every single rule that traditional speaking talks about. He would speak with no grammar, he would speak with no structure, but he speaks straight of the heart, and you sit there 20 minutes spellbound listening to him. That's the kind of people that generation 3. The one that is going to come in the future, I'm very clear in my mind, I've done quite a bit of reading now, is one which will come with its AI assistant. If I belong to say that generation, and if I am to deliver a 20-minute talk, I will speak for 7 minutes. The AI assistant with the voice and with all the modulation will speak for 4 minutes. Then I will speak for 5 minutes. It will speak for 4 minutes, etc. That is how the structure would change. We'll go to the last one. We'll go to the 8th and the last one. The approach to work. The first generation is absolutely meticulous. Is the one that believes in detail. The second one is the one that leverages technology, uses technology in every single work that it does. What is the third one?
Utilize advanced software.
Yeah, the third is the generation that uses leading software to work. And what I put out there is only the context of audit. For example, if you were to audit receivables, the first generation would do all the detailed documentation, etc. The second generation will begin to use technology. Maybe when I say technology, maybe it use Excel. The third one will do the same thing, not with meticulous detail, not even with Excel, but with an application that's perhaps either tailor-made or just at that particular point in time downloaded from Google. Of course, they do not know what to download from Google. The best way to download from Google is to put out in Google saying software to do receivable analysis and all that. So that's the generation which possibly knows things, works at a way where it says, what is the output that is required? I will generate for you. How did I get the output? Do I know the subject? Don't come and ask. Is it right? Is it wrong? I don't know. If we believe that the end justifies the means, then what they do are right. Let's go to the one that's after that. I've given you a very rough insight, rough indication of various areas how people are different. It is not that I'm telling you anything absolutely new. Most of you know that. I now will very quickly run you through where the conflicts come from and what needs to be done to sort out the conflict. The first conflict, of course, comes in the way communication happens. The first generation and maybe the second generation speaks with a lot of respect. The third is not someone which necessarily does that. When I say don't speak with respect, their diction, their choice of words, their tone, the way that they respond are very different from the tone that you and I have been used to. But they actually don't mean anything bad. So first thing is communication style. Also what happens here is that the first generation and first half of the second generation prefer face-to-face. The second half of the second generation and third generation are absolutely happy doing virtual meetings. There are many clients of mine who would say, we will meet face-to-face. I often tell them, on Zoom also we are meeting face-to-face. What is the problem? And if I can say that fellow in the third generation, if you tell him come for Zoom meeting, he will say, no sir, we will do it on mobile. And when he comes on mobile, he doesn't even put his video on. I somehow get cheesed off. And then I realize that, okay, that's perhaps how it works. I've always believed that if there is an online meeting, be it Zoom, Teams or whatever, elementary courtesy demands that you put out your video or put out your video, and if the senior there or the team leader there says videos are not required, then you drop them. But that's not how it is, and I don't think I have learned over a period of time that perhaps they don't mean any disrespect. We will only have to learn to live with the newer generation. Work ethic, I think I broadly explained to you that technology proficiency, this is where the biggest gap is. I still remember 20 years ago, I would send a mail. It would go to an office of a client. The client is a very senior person in the organization, as senior as the head of accounts. The mail is printed by the secretary and this guy sits and reads. Today maybe it is not that bad, but it is equally bad. There are many people in their 50 plus who use a secretary to write their mails, whose secretary opens up the mail, reads up and then tells them, or who when they write their mails write the way that somebody scribbles a note on. And then there is the other generation which says, I will text you. I also, for example, get cheesed off when matters relating to office come on WhatsApp instead of by mail. Because I personally think that WhatsApps are just not trackable. So I have tried many times to tell people, but you know, if you tell them too often, they say, hey, this guy is a boomer. So what I decided is that if it comes on WhatsApp, I will forward it to my mail and then track it there. What I'm trying to tell is that there is a completely different beast out there, a completely different animal out there which believes that work should be done that way only. Leadership styles, I think today's boys and girls don't believe that there is a boss. That I think is right. If you have a problem and that's a problem that is sortable by one person, to them that day that guy is the boss. Tomorrow there is a different problem sortable by a different person, they will go to the other person. So if you are the boss there, I don't think you should get disheartened. You should accept that this is the way it works.
values and expectations.
Values and
Values and
expectations.
expectations.
Yeah, values and expectations. I already broadly said that earlier. Earlier generations' values were about work needs to be done well, office is most important. Office comes first, everything comes next. Today, the third generation is not that. The third generation is a generation that says that today there is an IPL final. That's far, far more important than finalization. I can finalize this accounts tomorrow, and if the boss says, no, I have to sign it today, don't misunderstand me when I say the guy would actually say, sir, that is your problem. If you want to sign it today, you sign it. My problem is I have to watch my IPL final. And in their own little way, they are perhaps right. Today, we have reached a stage where we can't even actually sit on judgment over anybody for that matter. So the expectations are very different. I'll very quickly summarize what I wanted to tell you. I began by talking to you about 4 distinct generations. I said that there is, just for sheer convenience, I said there is a generation 60 and before. There is a generation 80 and before. There is another generation 99 and before. And then there is a generation that is beginning in 2015, born post 2015. I said that the way each of these generations work, the way they take notes, the way they dress, the way they attend meetings, the way they approach work, the way they expect their rewards are very, very different. Between the first generation and the third generation, the gap is huge. And the fourth generation, we really don't know. We can only hazard a guess. But what I also wanted to tell you, I made that statement in passing. The reality is not about the age. The reality is not about the years. The reality is about the mindset. You can be in your 60s and still work or still give someone who is in his late 20s or early 30s a run for the money. You can still do as well as they do. Somebody in his 30s might still have the mindset of that earlier generation. What is most important according to me is that we are today in an era where, and in the next 10 years, we are definitely going to be an era where in companies and in audit offices, teenagers are going to work, especially in audit offices. Teenagers are going to work, people in their 20s are going to work, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and people in their 70s as well. And the people who are there in their 75, etc., far, far, far more healthy than the earlier generation. And when you see a 70-year-old work along with a 20-year-old, the sheer age gap talks about daunting generation gaps. But both the older generation and the younger generation need to realize, appreciate and understand that most people in most organizations work for the welfare of the organizations. If they can understand what structural differences are, and if they can realize that different people can think differently, and if they can, on an ongoing continuous education basis, people across the spectrum realize that they can upgrade and update it themselves, then I think we actually have the big advantage of experience working along with youth. People with lots of energy working with people with lots of idea. And that is an era in which I think all of us should be very, very happy to work. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Pattabhiram sir, for the wonderful presentation. There's always a gap between the generation that needs to be bridged. For that, first we need to understand the different types of generations, different characteristics of different generations. Last generation, Generation X, Generation Y are millennials, Generation Z, the evolution of accounting in line with the evolution of computers. And you have briefly covered how do they do it, how do they take notes, attend meetings, how do they dress, booted, suited or lungi culture, how do their subject knowledge, public speaking skills, their approach to work, and main importantly, conflict areas which needs to be taken care to bridge the gap. Thank you once again for the wonderful presentation. Yeah, big round of applause once again for Pattabhiram sir. So with that, we have come to the conclusion of this year's memorial lecture. May I now request CA A.V. Arun sir to come and formally propose vote of thanks.
Thank you, sir. So every time the hearing Pattabhiram sir is very interesting. So every time we come out with some interesting topics and interesting analysis and interesting information. I think this is the one topic we need to learn ourselves to manage the coming generation. So we are all almost in the second generation, sir. So. Okay. No, sir. We're born in second generation and living in the third generation. So we need to tackle this younger generation very carefully. Thank you, sir, giving a lot of tips to handle them. So thank you once again for accepting our invitation. So we thought, whenever, as said by our chairman, whenever we thought some new topics, some interesting topics, so Pattabhiram sir is the first choice for us. So thank you for accepting our invitation, sir, and also thank the participants for your participating in this program. Thank you, Honorable. I raised for the national anthem.
जनगण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ उत्कल गंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तब शुभ नामे जागे तब शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तब जय गाथा जन गण मंगल गायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता।